RBI's Monetary Policy Committee has decided to hold rates and keep the stance unchanged, and also did not signal and pivot anytime soon. Over the past year, we have seen about 150 basis points increase in the base lending rate. What does this mean for the realty sector? Is demand expected to pick up this year, or will buyers wait for a rate cut? Gulam Zia, who is the Senior Executive Director at Knight Frank, is joining us now to discuss the trends in terms of demand and also affordability now in the real estate sector. Mr. Zia, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, the indication is, of course, there could be a longer pause than what is expected, and a rate cut is not in the near future. Can you tell us what is the impact on the real estate sector currently? We are speaking about higher demand, but is that the case across all the segments? And also affordability. Where does real estate affordability stand currently?
Okay, let's start with the demand side of it. And let me highlight, as you mentioned, that in spite of that 150 bips of a rise in the lending rate, the demand has continued. Like, if I have to give you one surrogate as an example, the May transaction numbers in the month of May in Mumbai were as good as the same as what we saw in the last May of 2022. And month on month, it's repeating. So the point remains that in spite of whatever is happening on high lending rates, etc., in spite of that, the transaction volumes have not shrunk. And that's a positive. In fact, all that during the course where the lending rates were shooting up, we were concerned that there could be an impact, but the buyers have proved us all wrong. There's no let up in demand as yet. And second part of your question was which segment of the buyers are affected, if at all any. I would say none of them. In fact, prior to the market bouncing back, the worst hit segment was the upper end of the market. The luxury, uber luxury, super and high end of the market was worst affected. But on this side of it, there is no let up even in that market. The lowest end of the market, the affordable, was something which is always doing well. Mid end is highly dependent on the rate hikes, etc. But even there, we haven't seen any let up of demand, not just in Mumbai. In fact, anywhere in the country, every segment, the transaction numbers are looking very, very positive. That was one aspect. The second thing you spoke about is price rise. I would want to put across that the price rise is still very, very normal. I would say about 5% or so price rise per annum on an average is what we are observing right now. There is no undue reason to worry about affordability going out of the window. So we have affordability continuing. In spite of a very high lending rate, we shall continue to see the volumes grow. That's where it is right now.
Gulam, but we probably haven't seen the entire, RBI rate hiking cycle being passed on by the bank. RBI has raised rates by 250 basis points, till February of 2023. But as you pointed out, the MCLR, the bank lending rate to the consumer, has only gone up by 150 basis points. So even though the RBI may have paused, the banks could still go ahead and increase lending rates, which will hurt demand.
That is a very valid point. You're very, very right. We are worried about that. That's perhaps the only point which is remaining. There are 2 or 3 key stakeholders in the industry. On one side, you have the developer. On the other side, you have the HFCs, the home loan guys. And of course, there's a buyer. Now, in this entire thing, while developers have very smartly understood the market, pulse of the market, and haven't really been taking the prices up, home loan interest rate, the lending rate, is the only concern. And as I say, in spite of that 150 bips of an increase, not much of an impact was seen on the buyers. So I want to assume that going forward, even banks will understand, the lending agencies will also understand that if they increase it a lot, then the buyers may be put off. And that's something which is a balance, which at least right now, we don't see any problem. But going forward, as you rightly said, if another 100 bips which is pending to be passed on the transmission, if that happens, then there could be some worry to look after. But in the interim, we don't see any concern for the industry.
Okay, Gulam, you mentioned that even the lower end of the spectrum is not seeing an impact. So we were speaking to some of these listed players who cater to the affordable segment. But they did indicate that, okay, maybe if it's a lower end of the housing demand, it is seeing some impact. So we are talking about this K-shaped recovery. I'm just trying to understand the demand prospects that you're talking about. That's just the case in Mumbai, or across the country, we are seeing some impact in the affordable segment at least?
Well, this is something which I am at pains to explain. When you're looking at the growth in the mid segment, which is the highest, and the upper end of the market, which is also pretty high, comparatively, the growth in the bottom of pyramid is not as good, but growth nonetheless. So let me highlight this, that the rate of growth is not as good as the rest of the segments of market, but affordable housing is also doing a fairly decent growth rate. It is clocking. Last year, we had seen, compared to the previous year, almost about 5 to 6% of growth in the bottom pyramid, the low-most end of the market as well, where the mid to high end were growing at 25-30%. So that's where I wanted to highlight that while the transactions are going unabated, it's only the rate of growth, which many of the developers would also be highlighting. And that's a worry because a lot of investment has come in terms of new launches, etc. Maybe the supply side would have to look at how many more units you want to bring in the market basis, the growth in the affordable housing. But I would want to still correct this, that the growth is nonetheless there. It's not as good as the rest of the segments.
Particularly on the Mumbai real estate, I'm just a bit curious, right? Prestige has made a big splash. Their hoardings, their properties are all over, Mumbai, particularly South Bombay. So we can, it's very apparent in the commercial as well as the residential real estate. Is this creating a dent to the other Mumbai-based real estate companies? Are they feeling the heat of Prestige's entry in Mumbai?
I won't say so. Please understand that prior to or during pandemic, we did see a lot of developers falling by the wayside. So there was a huge crunch in the supply side agencies. The developers were, very few good developers were still standing in the market. So we needed good developers to come in, because if we had to continue to launch almost about 100,000 housing units every year, just the top 10-20 developers would have not sufficed. So we needed more players to come in the market, and the likes of Prestige or Purvankaras, etc., have been adding to what was already required. So I feel it's a positive for the Mumbai real estate market, that players from the other sectors, other regions are also coming in Mumbai. And as I said, the top developers, who were in any case very few, are also finding the competition very good, even from the buyer's perspective, because Mumbai developers
Gulam, from a buyer's perspective, no doubt it's great, right? You've got a choice now. But the supply goes up, right? And the companies which are listed are all in that premium, residential space where Prestige is playing. So it is direct competition for them.
Of course, it's a competition, but let's also recognize that the buyers have a certain requirement of branded products, and those branded products, as I said, there were very few remaining in the branded segment. Of course, the non-branded also, a lot of them have come afresh. Every time the cycle of the industry changes, a lot of developers fall apart and new developers come in the market. So this is absolutely common and normal during looking at the cycles of the.
No, we do get your point, and we've seen a lot of other players making strides in the Bengaluru markets. So of course, these players, they have to find newer markets, and that's exactly what they're doing here. Gulam, it was a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining us. And while there is an impact on the residential real estate that we are talking about, in the US, there have been impact on the commercial real estate as well. So of course, that is something that we'll be tracking closely, what's happening in the Indian commercial market because of the rate cycle that we are in. We'll do one thing, slip into a short break. On the other side,